What is up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to be getting into my February or January 5th edition of the Bracketology, and it's official. Joel and Darty's now going to be coming out with Bracketologies every Tuesday and Friday. It's officially that time, so we have some crazy matchups coming on here this weekend. Conference play, Illinois Purdue plays tonight. That's going to be a fun one. And some other ones, and we had a few changes in this bracketology, but yeah, so we're gonna have two videos of bracketologies each week now coming here. These are my favorite videos, honestly, to make, guys. If you're a bracketology fan, stay tuned for some more. If you're a college basketball fan like me, stay tuned for all of the craziness. But anyway, let's look at this bracket watch. The top overall seed remains Purdue. Right now, they have a big matchup, like I said, versus Illinois tonight. I could honestly see Illinois pulling off the win, but we'll see what happens. First team out is going to be TCU, and then the last team in is Northwestern. If we look at the bubble here, last four byes, Virginia kind of climbing back up. Utah State, South Carolina, and then Florida. Last four in is going to be Texas, Nebraska, New Mexico, and Northwestern. First four out going to be TCU, St. John's, Texas Tech, and Cincinnati, who has a big game with my BYU Cougars this weekend. And then the next four out going to be Kansas State, Butler, who has a big game versus UConn, Washington, and Wake Forest. Look at this bracket here. Let's look at the movement here. Starting out with New Mexico State's going to be new to the fifth as a 16. Stetson is going to be new to the fifth as a 16. And then I think Joe Lendardi got this mixed up. New Mexico's actually in place of TCU there, as you can see. And then Northwestern is going to be dropping down to the play-in. All right, so let's look at this bracket here. Starting out with the Midwest region, we do have Purdue as the number one overall seed. Weber State jumping up to the 13. Clemson losing to Miami, dropping down to the 3. We have Ohio State going to be jumping up to the 7 seed. In the South region, Houston, the number 1 seed, still there. Providence going to be, and their big play is starting. I know they haven't played the most competitive opponents, but now they get a real test in the Big 12 this season. So we'll see if they're legit. I do believe in that team, but dropping down is going to be Providence. High Point near the fifth, that's a 14, and then Utah State jumping up to the 10. In this West region, Kansas, the number 1 seed there. South Dakota State going to be jumping up to the 16 and out of the play-in. Colorado dropping down to the 8. Oregon out of the Pac-12, new to the field, that's a 12. Virginia jumping up to the 10, and then Norfolk State jumping up to the 15. In the East region, UConn, the 1 seed there. Dayton jumping up to the 8. Indiana State new to the field as a 12. Creighton jumping up to the 6. Grand Canyon jumping up to the 11. Morehead State new to the field as a 14. Michigan State jumping up to the 7. And then Vermont dropping down to the 15. All right, so let's get into this bracket here. Starting out with Texas versus Nebraska. Give me Texas in that matchup. I do think that New Mexico State will be able to beat Merrimack there. And New Mexico, Northwestern, I am going to go with New Mexico in that game, as well as Southern pulling off the win over Stetson. So in the round of 64, our first matchup, Purdue, New Mexico State. Give me Purdue to win that one. Ole Miss, I do think, holds off Iowa State. Then I'm going to go with another 12/5, or not another, but keeping this upset here. I did it last time. Do it again. Not a believer in Baylor. Give me Princeton to pull off the win over the Baylor Bears. And then Memphis, I think, beats a good Weber State team. And I'm going to go another upset here. Texas over Alabama. We obviously have the first 4 game there with Texas winning it. So that's a big-time win for the Texas Longhorns, and we obviously see a lot of first 4 teams pulling off the win. So give me Texas to beat Alabama, who I'm not the biggest believer in. And then Clemson, I do think, holds off Akron. Not a believer in Clemson, but I don't like Akron in that matchup. Ohio State, Mississippi State, give me the 7-seeded Ohio State team. And then Marquette, I think, pulls off the win versus Colgate. Down in this region, we have UConn beating Marist. A really good matchup between Dayton and Miami. I think at this point I would have to go Miami. They impressed me against Clemson, but I could see that one going either way. Oklahoma, Indiana State, a 5-seeded Oklahoma team. Give me Indiana State, another 12/5 here, pulling off the win. Indiana State, underrated 12 seed there. They're in a really good, solid conference there as well. Give me Indiana State to pull off this one. Good teams there. Wisconsin, Samford. I am going to go with the 4-seeded Wisconsin team in that one. And then as much as I want to go with 11-seed Grand Canyon, really freaking good team. I just can't see it. I'm going to have to go with Creighton in that matchup. Really good, solid Creighton team. BYU, I do think holds off Morehead State. Rematch of earlier in the season, James Madison, Michigan State. I don't like this matchup, though, with James Madison because these two have met earlier this year. I think if they had another rundown, Michigan State would get the better of them with Tom Izzo. But really good James Madison team. Just an unlucky matchup, I think, right there. And then I'm going to go with Vermont to pull off the 15/2 seed upset here over Tennessee. I was waiting for another Tennessee 15 seed win here. If Tennessee's a 2 seed, guys, and at this point in time, I'm just not a believer in that team. I just don't like that team in general. I think they're poised for an upset. They're a little bit slow on offense. Can get very cold. I like this Vermont team a lot. Really good program. If you have not known, Vermont's made the tournament a lot. They are really solid. Give me them to pull off the one over Tennessee and get a huge upset. So, if I do say so myself, some crazy upsets so far in this bracket. But moving on, Houston Southern. Give me Houston to pull off the win. Nevada Providence, an 8-seeded Nevada team. Providence just lost to Seton Hall. I do think I would go with Nevada, but it's a tight one for sure. I am going to go with Auburn to pull off the win over Northwestern. Florida Atlantic, I think, would beat McNeese State. Villanova, Florida. Give me Villanova in that one. North Carolina versus High Point, I do like North Carolina in that game. Utah, I do think would hold off Utah State, and then Kentucky beats Drexel. So after some crazy upsets, we do have all chalk in that region. Down here, Kansas, I do think would beat South Dakota State. Colorado Gonzaga, 8-seeded versus a 9-seed. As much as it pains me, I am going to move Gonzaga above Colorado in that particular matchup. Colorado State, Oregon. Give me the 5-seeded Colorado State team. Duke, I think, would hold off UC Irvine. South Carolina, I think, pulls off the slight 11/6 upset over San Diego State. Could see that one going either way, but I do think I need to throw in an upset there. Give me South Carolina to pull off the win. Illinois, I do think, beats Fort Wayne. Texas A&M, I think, holds off Virginia. And then Arizona beats Norfolk State. So I believe no 10 seeds advances on, right? Yeah, I don't like the 10 seeds in these matchups, unfortunately. All right, so for a spot in the Sweet 16, I do like Purdue to beat Ole Miss. I'm going to go with Memphis to beat Princeton as much as I want to bring Princeton to the Sweet 16. That would be the second straight year for them, but I don't see that one happening. Clemson, Texas. Let's go with the 11-seeded Texas team to go on a run. I'm just not a believer in Clemson. I'm worried about Texas playing a first 4 game and then going 2 other games in a row after that to try and win. But I do think they could get it done against a Clemson team. Give me Texas to win it. Marquette, Ohio State, I would go with Marquette in that matchup to move on. All right, down in this region, we have UConn, Miami. I'm going to go with the 8/1 upset here. Give me Miami. I know UConn, obviously a really freaking good team out of the Big East, but we've seen it before with a team like UConn or a national champion. They just have a tough time in the round of 32. It happens a lot to the previous champions. I think it could happen again, especially with a really good Miami team who's experienced in the tournament. Give me them to pull off the win. And I'm actually going to go with another upset here. Give me Indiana State to continue a Cinderella run into the Sweet 16. This has just been a madness tournament bracket here, I guess. But Indiana State, I'm just not the biggest believer in Wisconsin. I'm a really big believer in that Indiana State team. So give me them to pull off the win. And now we have an 8 and a 12 in the or the 9 and the 12 in the Sweet 16. Pretty crazy there. BYU Creighton, really good matchup. I do think I would go with BYU, though, in that one. And then Michigan State, Vermont, a 15 versus a 7 seed. As much as I want to go with Vermont, I do think I would have to go with 7-seeded Michigan State. So a really chaotic region down there. And then we have this chalk region just out of the blue here. Houston, Nevada. Give me Houston. Florida Atlantic, Auburn. Let's give Auburn some love. Give them a win to move on to the Sweet 16 as a 5 seed. North Carolina, Villanova. I do think I would go with North Carolina in that game to pull off the win over Villanova. And then Kentucky, I think, would beat Utah. So basically all chalk besides that 5/4 in that region. Kansas, Gonzaga, I would go with the Jayhawks, as well as Duke pulling up the win over Colorado State. Illinois, I do think would beat South Carolina, and then Arizona, I think, would pull off the win over Texas A&M. So the left side of the bracket is all chaotic. The right side just don't see upsets in those matchups. All right. Purdue, Memphis for a spot in the Elite Eight. Really want to go with Memphis, but they just barely beat someone last night by a buzzer beater. Forgot who it was. It was a crazy win, but it does worry me that the close game against that team. I do think Purdue is dominant. Give me them to pull off the win. Really do believe in that Memphis team, though, as well. As much as I want to continue Texas's run, I think Marquette would get the better of them. Give me them to move on to the Elite Eight. And then in this region, I just want to kind of run this down. A 9 seed, 12 seed, 3 seed, and then a potential 15 seed, but we do have a 7 seed. Just a weird region. But Miami, Indiana State, as much as I would like to bring Indiana State, I do think their run would come to an end versus Miami. Give me Miami to move on to the Elite Eight, where they will face BYU to pull off the win over Michigan State and move on to the Elite Eight. Over here, we have Houston versus Auburn, a 1 seed team versus a 5 seed. Give me Houston, though, in that matchup. And then Kentucky, North Carolina, really freaking good matchup between these two blue blood programs. I am going to go with North Carolina, though, as the 3 seed to pull off this slight upset over Kentucky. Down in this region, Kansas versus Duke. Let's give the Jayhawks some love, move them to the Elite Eight, where they will face Illinois, Arizona. I went with Illinois in our last video. I think I'm going to flip it up this time, though, and go with Arizona. We'll see how Illinois looks against the big-time Purdue team. Still a really believer in that Illinois team. They're a really good team, but I am going to go with Arizona to pull off the win. All right, Purdue Marquette for a spot in the Final Four. I do have to go with Purdue to move on. And then we have BYU Miami, a 3-seeded Miami BYU team versus the 9-seed Miami. I do think BYU, call me biased, but I do like BYU's draw in this region if they got these matchups. Give me them to move on as a 3-seed to the Final Four, where they will face they'll face Purdue, but Houston, North Carolina, 1-seeded team versus a 3-seed. I do like the 1-seeded Houston in that matchup. And then we have a finish here with Kansas, Arizona. I am going to have to go with Kansas, Arizona. It didn't look great in their last matchup versus Stanford. So we do have 3 number 1 seeds and then a 3-seeded BYU team in the Final Four after all this chaos. So for a spot in the national championship, Purdue versus BYU. As much as I love my Cougars, I just don't see them beating Purdue at this point. That would be a very tough matchup for us, but Purdue, I think, would win that one. And then Houston versus the Jayhawks. Let's give the Jayhawks some love. A battle of 2 Big 12 teams. By the way, 3 Big 12 teams in this Final Four. Didn't realize that, but could see that happening. 2 of them were new with Houston and BYU, but Kansas, I do think, would win that game. So now we have Purdue versus Kansas for a spot for the national championship. And I really like the Jayhawks as well. I think this team is poised to make a run. And in this bracketology, let's give them some love. Give them the national championship. Anyway, guys, thank you all for watching this video today. A crazy one. If just take a look at this region down here with all the madness. But anyway, guys, thank you all for watching. Peace out.